Hello, welcome to the 76th episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. I mentioned in one of the previous series that the world is changing week by week. There are things going on, and there are two developments which I'm going to discuss over the past week. One is the Zelenskyy debacle at the White House, the setup that was done for Zelensky, and the other is the PKK, which didn't figure prominently in the news but is as important as the other one. So let me start with to explain how the whole theme that developed was a setup. It was not something that developed spontaneously. And in order to do that, I'll analyze an interview with Marco Rubio. And Rubio said, after the show, the president has been very clear. He campaigned on this. He thinks that war should have never started. He believes, and I agree, that had he been president, it would never have happened. He's trying to bring an end to this conflict. And he continues, we have explained very clearly what our plan is here, which is we want to get the Russian to the negotiating table. We want to explore whether peace is possible. This rare mineral agreement that was supposed to be signed today, we are talking about it last Friday, was supposed to be an agreement that binds America economically to Ukraine, which to me is a security guarantee in its own way because we are involved. That was all explained. So he's saying, look, this rare mineral agreement is presented as a colonial thing by Zelensky. Oh, you want to take all my minerals, and all the time I thought that, we were fighting a war that was in your interest, and now you want to pay, you want me to pay for it. Yes, that is what Trump wants. He wants you to pay for the war. That is how colonialism works. So he said to Trump, I want a security guarantee. I want that you put a guarantee that if there's some conflict going on with Russia, then you will step in and help us. And Trump and Rubio and others were saying to him, no, the fact that we have a economic agreement is a guarantee in itself. But Zelensky said, no, that's for me not enough. Rubio says, for the last 10 days, and every engagement we have had with the Ukrainians, not only with Zelensky, with his team, there has been complications in getting the point across. So they are talking and talking for 10 days. He says the agreement could have been signed 5 days ago, but they insisted on coming to Washington. Rubio is saying, hey guys, we agreed, signed it, that's it. And then he says, don't come here and create a scenario where you're going to start lecturing us about how diplomacy isn't going to work. So they expect that when he comes, he will start doing what he has done in the past 10 days in all the encounters with the Americans, which is lecturing them. This is how bad Putin is. Putin can be trusted, etc. And Rubio is saying, don't come lecturing us and create a scenario. So they now knew that if Zelensky would come, he might make a scenario. So Trump said, you know what, let's teach him a lesson. Let's provoke him to make the scenario in front of the American people, not in a closed room. I think that is what they were saying. So that's why he brought in JD Vance, the vice president, because that's the guy who will take on Zelensky. So they created a setup. And Marco Rubio says, so as the president, Zelensky took it in that direction, it ended in a predictable outcome as a result. Predictable means they knew that if you push him in that direction, this will become out of it, which is a whole row. They set him up. It's unfortunate that it was supposed to be this way, but that's the path he chose. There was no need for him to go in there and become antagonistic. Forcing the president into a position where you're trying to go to him into attacking Putin, calling him names for maximalist demands about Russia having to pay for the reconstruction. These are all the sort of things that you talk about in a negotiation. And so you start to perceive that maybe Zelenskyy doesn't want a peace deal. He says he does, but maybe he doesn't. And that active, open undermining of efforts to bring about peace is deeply frustrating for everyone who has been involved in communication with them leading up to today. And I think he was wasting our time for a meeting that was going to end the way it ended. They expected that it would end like this, so they set him up. Rubio was saying, I asked people, what is the European plan to end the war? I can tell you what one foreign minister told me, and I'm not going to say who it was but I can tell you that one of them told me, and that's it, that the war goes for another year, and at that point Russia will feel so weakened that they will beg for a peace. That's another year of killing, another year of dying, another year of destruction. And by the way, not a very realistic plan in my point of view. Obviously, they are dreaming, they are fantasizing in Ukraine and in Europe about the fact that Russia is being defeated. Nonsense. And they know that is nonsense. Trump knows that's nonsense. Rubio knows that is nonsense. So they say these guys have no plan. So we need to step in and bring a peace about. And then he continues, but again, when you have comments that appear to be deliberate, I mean, after having discussed this repeatedly, it deliberately appears to be geared towards making the argument that peace is not possible. You start to suspect, does he really want an end to this war? Does he think that we have to do whatever he says and give him anything he wants without any end game? That was Biden's strategy, and we were funding a stalemate. Now he says, over the last 10 days, the Ukrainians have met with the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of State, the Vice President of the United States, had a phone call, and he was in the Oval Office today. I've talked to the Foreign Minister of Ukraine 3 times in the last 10 days. The argument is that we are not engaging, and you keep reading this press account about, oh, well, they are leaving us out. We are not involved. We are not engaged. None of these things are true. And it continues. So all that led up to today in a deep sense of frustration, and my hope is that this all can be reset and maturity can kick in and some pragmatism. Now, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, had an interview on Fox TV, and he says the real tragedy here is maybe things can be repaired for the administration, but I don't know how the American people are going to feel. So look what they did. They set up a show, a television show, set a trap for Zelenskyy, knowing that Zelenskyy was going to fall for it, and Zelenskyy would do these stupid things. And therefore, the American people say, can you do business with this guy? Scott Bessent said, he and I had a very heated exchange in Kiev. I think the same thing may have happened between him and Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio in Munich. And you know, to come in and behave like this was unacceptable. Many of the European, or much of the European aid has come in the form of debt. Thus far, the US has put in grant, and this is not a debt. So that's another thing that the people in the United States here, we are paying, we are giving grants for the war in Ukraine. Obviously, this grants goes to U.S. military companies. That's another side of the thing. But Ukraine don't have to pay anything. But the Europeans who gave money to Ukraine, they gave in as a loan, so they get it back. So this is about the security in Europe. How stupid can the Americans be? And that is what Trump showed to the American people. So he used a television show, which he created. At the end, he said, this is marvelous television show. They knew before. And what they used it for was mobilizing their mega base, Make America Great Again, to fight the deep state. And they did that by exposing Zelenskyy as a warmonger who takes our money, don't care about people dying, and is playing with World War III. And Biden made sure that before he left, he gave a package aid that would continue after Trump takes power for 6 months. Now there's no mineral deal, no peace, but there is payback time, like Iraq, like colonial wars, where the loser has to pay money to the victor. So interesting, eh? You would say this is fantastic that you can see what's happening in the White House with all these interviews that Trump is getting. Freedom of press. Christian Amanpour of CNN says, this very strange new White House way of having these long and lengthy Oval Office press meetings where they do talk for a long time, this is not usual. This is an accident waiting to happen. Look, this is a journalist saying we should control the narrative. It's an independent journalist would say you shouldn't control narrative. You should go and investigate and talk to people in power. And she says people in power shouldn't give lengthy press meeting where journalists could take all kind of questions because they could do some stupid things. And that is what Zelenskyy did, a stupid thing. And this shows you how the media is part of the colonization of the mind. So where do we go from here? Obviously, Europe has to rein in Zelenskyy because without American military might, nothing will happen. So Europe is something that, an entity that has to take a stance how to move forward. But they don't have a plan. The only plan is continue the war, but they can't continue the war without the US. So they are preparing the next step against Zelenskyy, which is a corruption case. So in the coming weeks, you might find all kinds of news items that deals with Zelenskyy, the corrupt official. Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency have agreed to an audit of US funds sent to Ukraine. President Zelenskyy, in an interview, explained how Ukraine's military had received only a portion of the more than 175 billion that the US had earmarked for the conflict. And one Republican Senator, Hawley, has pledged to introduce legislation that would require a full audit of every dollar sent to Ukraine. You might think everybody would be in favor, but he says the Biden administration has resisted efforts to track aid spending. And he suggested that an audit could expose widespread misuse of funds. He says, if you think the US Agency for International Development is corrupt, just wait till we see how our money has been spent. So these guys are preparing the next step against Zelenskyy, which is corruption, and it might involve some people of the Biden administration. Now, peace is going to come, but without Zelenskyy, his time is over. Europe can't replace the US military and financially, so Trump is going to move forward with Russia and they will impose a deal through the battlefield, the Russians. The other thing which is very important is the surprise of the statement by PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan. He is the leader of the Kurdistan Workers' Parties, founded it in 1978, and has called on the group to lay down its arms and disband the PKK. And the statement was read in front of Kurdish politicians in Turkey. And he says there's a turning point in the decades-long conflict between the PKK and Turkey, a struggle that has claimed tens of thousands of lives in the past 40 years. And he explained that armed struggle against the state was once necessary due to policies that denied Kurdish identity and restricted Kurdish rights and freedom. But now the situation has changed. The goal of an independent Kurdish state, the original goal of the PKK, which was later changed into seeking autonomy and increased political and cultural rights within Turkey, that changed, Öcalan says, and I quote, The PKK was born in the 20th century in the most violent epoch of the history of humanity, amidst the two world wars, under the shadow of the experience of real socialism and the Cold War around the world. The outright denial of Kurdish reality, restrictions on basic rights and freedom, especially freedom of expression, played a significant role in its emergence and development. However, that because of democratic steps taken by the Turkish government on Kurdish issues, along with regional development, armed resistance no longer holds any means. All groups must lay their arms and the PKK must dissolve itself. Major thing. And he says, a separate nation state, federation, administrative autonomy, or cultural solution for the Kurds failed to answer Turkish society's needs. All groups must lay the iron and the PKK must dissolve itself. Respect for identities, free self-expression, democratic self-organization of each segment of society based on their own socio-economic and political structure are only possible through the existence of a democratic society and political space. There is no alternative to democracy in the pursuit and realization of a political system. Democratic consensus is the fundamental way. When he talks about regional development, one of the regional development was the close relation that the PKK developed with the US Army and thus became part of the US strategy in Western Asia in support of Israel. And at the end of the day, this would lead the PKK playing a reactionary role in the geopolitics of Western Asia. And by freeing the PKK from armed struggles and the alliance with the USA, it will be possible in the future that the Kurdish struggle will become part of a wider struggle for decolonization of Western Asia. An alliance between the Kurds and the Turks can be dangerous for the survival of the Zionist state. And this is a major thing in the coming years. So that's what it is. We'll see what the coming week brings. If you want to support this channel, subscribe to it, share it with friends, families, and colleagues, or encourage them to subscribe, get involved in discussion group, or make a donation via sandahira.com. Thank you very much for your attention.